Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the New York Islanders as their season has officially wrapped up after a devastating loss again to the Carolina Hurricanes. And what's the saying? Insanity? I've been saying this a lot on the channel recently because this is not only a theme for the Islanders, it's multiple teams around the league, but insanity. What is the definition of insanity? Doing the same things over and over and over again. And for the New York Islanders, once again, they lose in the first round. They haven't won a round since the Eastern Conference second round against the Boston Bruins. That is the last time in 2021. That's the last time the New York Islanders won a playoff series. Obviously, they lost in the conference finals to Tampa, which was devastating beyond all hell. Game 7 against Tampa. How the Islanders have fallen since then. They lost to the Hurricanes the following 2 years. And then, of course, this year, they lose to Carolina again. Oh, you can't make this stuff up. And, for the Islanders, man, it all comes down to we knew what we were going into this season. You know, the Islanders going into this year, they made no moves last offseason. They made really no moves at the trade deadline. The Islanders didn't do enough to get better, and Carolina was better this year. They made trades to get better. Their team, in terms of health and injury-wise, was better going into this series, and the Islanders were just not ready for that matchup. Now, I will say, in terms of positivity here, the Islanders held their own in this series. They were out-dominated most of these games. Outshot, outplayed, out-skilled, out-skated. But they were still in these games. And there's so much glimpses of the magic of the teams we saw in 2020 and 2021 for this current team. But there's just not enough there. There's not enough clutch scoring like we saw back in 2020 and 2021. And the defense isn't as good. And the goaltending wasn't as good. And just so many things that you look back on this series, and I said this in the elimination video for the Islanders, it's just what could have been for this team had they been able to just score a couple goals here. If they started Varlamov in Game 3, had they been able to hold the lead in Game 2 and win that game with a 3-0 lead, and Game 5, they came back, made it 3-3, and then all of a sudden in a span of 10 seconds, it's boop, 2-goal lead for Carolina. What? You go to the bathroom, right? Go grab some new popcorn or, Reese's Pieces. That's one of my favorites, Reese's Pieces. You go back, take your trip from 7-Eleven. You come back, and it's 5-3. What happened? And that's just been the entire season for the Islanders, and we know this well. I think it's to the point now. I think at this point it is 30 blown leads during an 82-game schedule plus playoffs. So what is that? 5 playoff games plus the regular season. So in 87 games, the Islanders had 30 blown leads. Oh my God. But that's been this season for the Islanders. It's been such a roller coaster ride of highs going into the playoffs and lows in February where it looked like this team wasn't even going to make the playoffs. They had, I think, less than a 2% chance of even making the damn playoffs. They somehow make the playoffs. They defy the odds. All the NHL is pissed that the Islanders, those pesky Islanders, clinched their ticket back to the playoffs, and then they fell apart in the playoffs again. And we knew that this was going to be a tough series. Carolina, I would say, is the second or third best team, depending on if it's Florida or Carolina. Maybe we'll even see that matchup later this year. But the Rangers are the clear favorite right now, and then Florida and Carolina seem to be 2 and 3 in the East right now. It's one of those things where the Islanders held their own, but this team is not at that level that they were. And like I said, we saw so much regression from guys like Wahlstrom and Dobson, who we were hoping to see more from, and that really just didn't work out for the team. And, Barzal was hurt for this series. I'm very set on that. I think they played either it was the Montreal Canadiens game or the Pittsburgh Penguins game, and Barzal left the game during the game, got hurt, and then he came back to the bench and played the rest of the game. And I remember there was an odd man rush because I was at UBS Arena. I was on that side. The Islanders were in the second period. Barzal's coming back on it's almost a semi-breakaway and just stops at the blue line. And I'm like, oh, shit. That is not good. Because we know how fast Barzal is, and if he has a semi-breakaway, he's taking it to the net. He didn't on this play because I think he was hurt. and he never looked the same after that. The way we're used to Barzal kind of like a NHL player, kind of with 99 speed, zooming around players and skating around the net and the blue line and dancing around people. He did that very few times during this series because I truly believe he was hurt. And that really hurt the Islanders. And as much as I like to blame, I would blame it on Barzal because he didn't score enough in this series. The reality is he was hurt. And it's hard for me to blame him because he was not at maximum health. And, Palmieri didn't play his best. Lee had a chance to put in the game winner or potentially make this a one-goal game in Game 5. And Palmieri and Dobson in Game 2 and Game 3. They both got robbed in Game 2 and 3. You just look at this series and you're like, what could have been? And this series is 4-1. And Carolina won. And the Hurricane fans they have sucked recently this week. But the Islanders held their own in this series, and I know you don't want to hear that. And I hate to say it, if Lou Lamoriello's still here, I wouldn't be surprised. As much as I don't think he should be, I wouldn't be surprised. And this is where the testament to the ownership is. Are they okay with the Islanders continuing to lose in the first round of the playoffs against Carolina? Because this is what we're seeing. They're not better than Carolina. They're not better than the Rangers. They're not better than anything in the rest of the Atlantic. Toronto, Boston, Florida. I don't think they beat any of those teams. And, and next year, Ottawa's going to be better. Buffalo's going to be better. Detroit's going to be better. The Devils are going to be back. That third spot in the Metro ain't going to be there. It's going to be the Devils, Rangers, and Hurricanes. I'd be shocked if they're not there. The Penguins, the Penguins and the Capitals are kind of dragging the Islanders down with them next season because I think those three teams in the Metro are going to fall back and regress, which, like I said, leaves room for the Buffaloes, Red Wings, Senators, those teams to kind of rise up. And, of course, the Devils, who I expect to be one of the top teams in the division. So, man, it's tough. And I'll be making videos about the identity line. We've probably seen the last time of Cal Clutterbuck and Matt Martin and Cizikas together. The identity line, I'll be making a video about that this summer. What's the future for Patrick Waugh and Lou Lamoriello? Because I think there's a lot of questions about should they come back. I think Patrick Waugh could come back, but if they get rid of Lou and bring in a new GM, well, is there a new philosophy for maybe bringing in a new head coach? Is that something that gets brought up? And then comes the conversation for, what do you do with, we're going to do this here. So I'm going to go with the guys that they should let walk, the guys they should trade, the guys they should extend, and of course, who should they keep and what's coming soon. So let's start off with the guys that need to walk. So Matt Martin, Cal Clutterbuck, Robert Bortuzzo, Sebastian Aho, all should be gone. And I hate to say that because I love Martin and Clutterbuck, but I think Father Time has done them in. Clutterbuck, he's a good player. He's given his all to this team, and I love what he does. But he's just not there anymore. He's just not. And neither is Martin. I mean, Martin was hurt in Game 3. I mean, I think there was a point where he was actually laying on the ground on the bench. He has given his all to this team, but he's missing hits. He got dropped by Stefan Nason in Game 2. This is just one of those things where it's just the circle of life of hockey. The Islanders need to get younger there. They have players in the AHL that can fill those roles for cheaper, that can actually play. I think the Islanders need to look in a different direction there. Bortuzzo and Aho, the Islanders need to rebuild that blue line a little bit. I'm fine with letting those guys go. And as much as this sucks to say, I think Oliver Wahlstrom, just free this kid. I think the Islanders need to let him go in free agency. Somebody's going to take him, like Colorado or something, and he's going to do well there, but I think Wahlstrom needs to find a fresh start. He was scratched basically all of the calendar of 2024, except maybe 2 games, right? The final game of the season against Pittsburgh, and maybe a game or 2 in January and February, and that's it. So I think for him and for the Islanders, it's best to let him go. Guys that they should maybe consider trading, and this list is pretty short because I don't know really what's out there, but what's out there for a Brock Nelson? Because he is so frustrating. He'll score goals for you, and he'll do good things, but then there's other moments where he looks completely out to lunch and really bad turnovers, not coming back for the defense. He's not much of a two-way player. Those things suck with Nelson, and it is so frustrating. I'm okay with letting him go. I'm also willing to let go of Anders Lee. As much as I love him, and he's a great player, and he, again, you see the theme with these players. They give their all, but there's not enough there. And Nelson is the exception of that. I would be more willing to let Nelson go. Anders Lee sucks because he's a good player, and I love what he does, but he's just not there anymore. So whether that means there's no market for him, and they have to buy him out, or they have to dump him in a trade, I don't care what you have to do. I think they need to move on from Anders Lee here. The idea of trading another first-round pick to dump a contract is so frustrating. But if there's a guy in free agency that is willing to go to the Islanders, maybe that's worth the risk, and you trade, and whatever you either, the money you save in a trade or whatever money gets bought out, you find someone to fill that void in the top 6 for the Islanders because they need it. And also, I'd be willing to move on from a guy like Pajot or Cizikas. Cizikas is my favorite New York Islander. I would hate if they traded Cizikas, but I'm willing to live with it if it means the Islanders are able to get something in return. And they have kind of somebody that's come up, which we'll talk about in a minute, that I think can fill that role, whether it's Pajot, whether it's Nelson, or it's Cizikas. One of those 3 centers can go for the Islanders and get somebody in that's cheaper. And then that leads me to the guys, keep these guys. Now, Simon Holmstrom, I'm kind of on the fence because he got bullied and didn't look great during the playoffs down the stretch. I don't think this is a forever New York Islander. I don't think this is going to be an Islander that's here for years to come. I think he's got a very short leash, but keep him around, I guess. I'm okay either way. Ruslan Ishkov, we didn't see enough of him. I think we just need to see more of him. And this is what I'm talking about. A guy like Ishkov could fill out Pajot or Cizikas' role in the bottom 6 as a center. I think he's more fitted to play in the top 6 and get that ice time just to see what he can do. And maybe that's where, if you trade out Nelson and or Lee, well, maybe you see Ishkov come in and play in that role. Mike Riley, I think he was a bright spot for the Islanders defense. I think Mike Riley should come back for the Islanders and should be a guy that plays a more prominent role. He was a guy that moved. He kind of reminds me of Nick Leddy a couple years ago. Like a poor man's version of Leddy, but a good version of that, where he actually brought the puck in. He didn't just dump and chase every time. He was aggressive as an offensive defenseman-ish, right? It's very loose with a guy like Mike Riley, but he definitely created some scoring opportunities for the Islanders, and more so than even some of the forwards for the Islanders. Mike Riley was a good piece there. And that leads me to some guy on the Islanders that I might be starting to develop a little bit of a bromance for, and that is Kyle McLean. He really was other than Mike Riley on the back end, I think Kyle McLean was the guy that gave me the most excitement as a New York Islanders player. I love what the kid does. He was so good for the Islanders, and he reminds me of so much of Casey Cizikas when he was younger. Casey was so much that type of player coming up from Bridgeport. I love what I've seen from Kyle McLean. I think that might be one of the best things that Lou Lamoriello has done. Now, that's saying a lot because he's a role player for the Islanders and is not supposed to be the key addition when you look at the Islanders. You can see the heart emojis in my eyes when I talk about Kyle McLean, because the same way I talk about Kyle McLean is the same way I talk about Casey Cizikas. It could be game 1 of the season. It could be game 82. It could be game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final. It could be game 43 in November. They play the same way every time, and I love what I've seen from Kyle McLean. The way he plays, if he plays that way throughout the rest of his career, he is going to get a jersey in my Islanders collection because he is that type of player. He's due for a contract this summer. Kyle, I love what you do, man. Do that for the rest of your career because you are a bright spot for this team this season. And, it's kind of sad to say that because I love what he does, but again, you want to be talking about like goal-scoring guys, and the Islanders just don't have enough of that. So, with that said, what's to come for the Islanders? And it's kind of sad. It's not what you're hoping for, Islanders fans. William Dufour, Cale Odelius, Isaiah George, and Jakub Skarek. So Dufour is the forward. Matthew Maggio is another forward to watch for. So those 2 guys for the Islanders have played okay in Bridgeport. I think Maggio and Ishkov were kind of the leaders for the Islanders in Bridgeport in terms of points and goals. So keep an eye out for those guys. Cale Odelius and Isaiah George are younger defensive prospects. I don't see them playing next season. Samuel Bolduc, that name probably sounds familiar. We saw him this season with the Islanders. If the Islanders don't package him up on a trade, he could be a guy that's on the lineup for the Islanders next season. Kind of reminds me of Johnny Boychuk, but he just needs to get a little bit better at skating. I think that's a real problem for Bold Duke, so hopefully he's able to do that next year. And Skarek, we're probably not even going to see Skarek next year. He might even be traded by then or just not re-signed, because the Islanders do have Varlamov and Sorokin, and unless they trade Varlamov, which right now would not seem like a good move, especially with the way Sorokin played this year, I just don't see an opportunity where Skarek's really going to get an opportunity, and I don't know if he's really earned the right to get that second spot from Varlamov. It just doesn't seem like he's really there yet, and he may never get there. So I'll be doing other videos on the Islanders this summer. This video is already 15 minutes. The reality is, guys, we knew what we were up against the entirety of making the playoffs, the series matchup going in. Nobody predicted the Islanders to win this series or do anything, and they held their own, and it sucks because that's not enough. That's not enough for what we expect from the Islanders, but until Lou Lamoriello leaves, this is going to be the New York Islanders for probably the next 3 to 4 years, as much as I hate to say it. And, probably by 2030, we're probably talking about a full-on rebuild for the Islanders, which may or may not include Barzal and Horvat and Dobson, and who knows, maybe even Sorokin. That's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. If you like this channel, want to see more videos like it, especially if you're an Islander fan, because I do post a lot of Islanders content, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel here down below. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you again next time. Peace out, guys.